London in the 1660s was a big city. It was 30 times bigger than any city, other city in England. It was crowded, densely packed. It was dirty. It was gridlocked with traffic jams. It was filled with filth, and everybody loved it. Everybody loved the city. It had been through a rough patch, a rough few years. In the past, in 1660, you have a king coming back to the throne, Charles II being restored to the throne after 11 years of a republic. You've got a lot of unrest. You've got parliamentarians are still disaffected. Parliamentarians are still sort of thinking, what about the good old cause? What did we fight the war for if we've got a king again? You've got royalists who are thinking, what are those parliamentarians still doing there? You've got an edgy city as well. Certainly by 1666, after a year of plague, London is starting to feel very jumpy indeed. There's those 3 6s in the date, which worry everybody. And of course, there have been omens all summer. There were 2 blazing stars seen in the sky in the spring and summer of 1666. There are rumours of insurrection, there are rumours of Republican insurrection. And most importantly, I think, in 1666 we are at war. We're at war with Holland. And to be honest, in the summer of 1666, I think the thing that everybody was worrying about was war. On Saturday, the 1st of September, 1666, the thing that everybody was talking about was a huge naval battle which was about to take place just off the Downs between an English fleet commanded by Prince Rupert and General Monk. And there were 100 English warships converging on an equally large Dutch fleet. And this was going to be it. England was going to trounce the Dutch. This was going to be the end of a war which had lasted for 2 years. And that's what everybody was worried about. We'd recently set fire to a Dutch town. 2 weeks earlier, a courtier called Sir Robert Holmes had landed at the Dutch port of Westerschelling, had set fire to 150 merchant ships and then burned the town in what London has called Sir Robert Holmes's bonfire. And we were still celebrating that, the fact that we'd done this to the Dutch. But this Saturday was going to be it. This was the Saturday this was the battle that was going to end the war. But as those ships converged on each other in the channel, a wind blew up, a strong breeze. It turned into a gale. On the Saturday afternoon, as those 2 fleets came together, they crashed together, sails were blown out, masts were toppled, ships collided with each other, they sank, and there was no battle. There's no end to the war. Both the Dutch and the English fleets limped back to port. And the significance of that for London is that evening, on the evening of Saturday the 1st of September 1666, that gale swept up. It hit the south coast of England. It swept up through Kent. It toppled chimneys and it lifted thatch. And round about midnight, 1 in the morning, on Sunday the 2nd of September 1666, that gale hit London. And that gale hit London just at a moment when a fire broke out in a baker's shop on Pudding Lane. The architecture of London was, in the 1660s, the architecture of London was a real muddle. I think it was, the streets, of course, were tightly packed. They were very narrow. Famously, they were built jettying out so that you may be a few 10 yards from your neighbour across the street at ground level, but your roofs might be almost touching as the first and second floors came closer and closer. They were made of wood, mostly. There were stone buildings. Major buildings were made of stone. The Guildhall, the Customs House, most of the churches were stone. But everyday homes, most of them were timber framed with lath and plaster infill, and that meant they burned very easily. Thomas Fariner, the baker, was woken by his daughter Hannah at 2 or 3 in the morning. Their manservant had smelled smoke. He'd tried to get downstairs to see what was going on. He couldn't. The smoke drove him back up the staircase. He told Thomas Fariner and Thomas Fariner's daughter and the maidservant that lived with them that there was a fire that they had to get out. They clambered out onto a windowsill and clambered into a neighbour's bedroom. History doesn't record what the neighbour thought, as an entire family sort of piled into this bedroom at 2 o'clock on a Sunday morning. Not an entire family. The legend is that the maidservant had a fear of heights. She couldn't walk out onto the ledge, and she is supposed to be the first mortality, the first fatal casualty of the Great Fire of London. About 3 or 4 in the morning, they woke up the mayor, Sir Thomas Bloodworth, and called him down to ask what they should do. They wanted to pull down houses that weren't actually burning, but which would form a sort of a fire break. And Thomas Bloodworth, who was a weak man, poor old Thomas Bloodworth, he said, well, you can't pull down these houses without the permission of the owners. Well, houses were tenanted in London. I mean, the owner could have lived in Peterborough or Coventry or Edinburgh for all we knew. And they said, if we don't pull down those houses, the fire's going to spread. And Thomas Bloodworth looked at it and said, that's not such a fire. A woman could piss that out. And went back to bed, and a place in the history books. Poor old Thomas Bloodworth. The fire did indeed spread. It reached Fish Street Hill, the neighbouring street leading down to the Thames. What we think happened is that embers from the bakers, from Thomas Farriner's bakery, and from other houses in Pudding Lane, lifted up and landed in the stable yard of a tavern on Fish Street Hill, a stable yard which was filled with hay and straw. In turn, that hay and straw caught flame, and that wind was still blowing, and the wind whipped up the burning straw and spread it along Thames Street. When Thomas Pepys woke up on Sunday morning, his maid woke him up and said there were 300 houses burning all the way along Thames Street. One of the significant contributing factors to the disaster, apart from that gale, which was still blowing on the Sunday and still blowing on the Monday and still blowing on the Tuesday, but one of the other contributing factors was that no one did anything. No one did anything to stop the fire. Everybody was concerned to evacuate their own goods. Everybody was anxious to move their goods. I mean, Samuel Pepys famously buried his Parmesan cheese in his back garden because he was so anxious that it was going to get, grilled cheese. And he got all the rest of his goods away downriver. But all over London, people were looking after their own and not trying to stop the fire. There was a fire engine up at Clerkenwell. A fire engine in the 1660s was actually a huge water tank on a sled, which was dragged down by men and who then pumped away. They pumped a jet of water which was probably reached about 3 or 4 feet. It was a dribble, but it was all they got. So they dragged it all the way down to Thames Street. They dragged it down to the Thames. They dragged it right down to the riverbank so that they could fill up the system with water to fight the fire. They got it wrong, and the fire engine slid gently into the Thames and floated away down the river and was never seen again. The rest of the firefighting efforts were very ad hoc. People were enlisted to help evacuate homes. Quite often they evacuated they evacuated goods from the homes, and those goods were never seen again. There was looting all the way along Thames Street. The fire was spreading westward all the time. It was driven by this gale all this time, all Sunday. The looting grew on Sunday, but so did the panic. Because of Sir Robert Holmes's bonfire, because England had set fire to a Dutch town 2 weeks before, the rumours started to spread quicker than the flames that this was a terrorist attack. The Dutch had arrived to burn the city. There were Dutch firebombers all over the city. In Chancery Lane, a woman wrote to a country cousin and said, "'Tis the Dutch fire, they're burning us, oh pity me, pity me." The flames were licking round the place. Everybody was in panic. Nobody was organising anything. All they wanted to do was get away. Samuel Pepys, in one of the most memorable images of the fire, talks about going downriver and seeing the pigeons that Londoners kept for food, fluttering, circling around their burning homes, and then as their wings were singed, they would fall down into the flames and die. There was chaos, there was panic. And there's this driving notion that it's a terrorist attack. And still the wind blew, still that gale blew from east to west. It pushed the flames. It leapt over fire breaks. If there was a stone wall that held the fire back, the fire would just leap over it. It would be put out at one end of a street and it would light up. It'd be lit up again at the other end of the street. So there's complete panic. Instead of working on putting out the fire, Many Londoners devoted their time to beating up any foreigner they could find. Anyone who looked French or German or Dutch or Portuguese, anyone who didn't look English was bound to be a firebomber. And people were lynched on street corners, people were kicked, people were beaten with sticks. So you've got this chaos going on, and all the time the flames are burning. All the time the wind is driving them westward. All the time you've got this fear of the enemy, fear that we're under attack. It was panic, it was chaos. You could see the flames, by Monday, you could see the flames in Oxford, 40 miles away. They lit up the sky. By daylight, there was a huge pall of smoke over the city, and when it broke, you could see the sun shining through blood red. It was a very, very frightening time.
Shows the Great Fire of London. It shows a scene from the Essex Stair, and you can just see London Bridge in the far right. It shows also that the fire's reached St Paul's, which we can pinpoint to a record in the diary of John Evelyn. So it's highly likely that this painting shows a specific moment in time, which is the 4th of September. We know the fire started on the 2nd of September, so you've seen this sort of 4-day window. This is a moment in time within that 4 days when the fire was raging. And you can really see the devastation. The sun in the far corner actually reminds you that this is a daytime scene, but the fire's caused such devastation, it's literally turned time upside down. Day has turned to night. So we can see that the blue sky is entirely blackened by smoke. We don't know the actual name of the specific painter, but it's likely to be by an Anglo-Dutch artist. The date range given for it is 1666, so the year of the fire itself, to 1700. So it's possible that this really is an immediate response to the fire. Something that perhaps supports that is the fact that the painting is very much about the moment. There's not so much of an intensive focus on architectural detail. It is about a spot moment in time, and it's about capturing that devastation. Here at Essex Stairs, you can see just how devastating the fire is in terms of people's view of it. You can see people in the foreground, arms in the air, in disbelief, arms wide, trying to sort of take in this devastation. There are even people cowering, just not even looking at the devastation of the fire. There are people loading boats as well. You get the impression of an evacuation, but I imagine this would have been a pretty horrific thing to have seen. And to know that it had been ongoing and was not under control, it must have really felt like something almost apocalyptic.
Is the 350th anniversary of the Great Fire of London. The tragedy affected everybody in the city at the time, including the Royal College of Physicians. Our home, which was located at Amon Corner, so just around the corner from St Paul's Cathedral, was completely destroyed by the fire, including most of our library and museum collections. The year before the Great Fire came to London, in 1665, it was the final outbreak of the Great Plague. Now, this affected everybody in the city. It was a very, very deadly, lethal disease. It had horrendous symptoms. It caused huge boils on the neck, the armpits and the groins. And there was no cure for the Great Plague. Anybody who could escape from the city did, including most of the physicians. Some of them were left to look after the population, but most of them unfortunately fled. Now, before the physicians fled the city, they thought to secure their treasure, their silver and their cash, into an iron chest, which they left in the care of their librarian, Christopher Merritt. Now, Christopher Merritt also fled the city, and unfortunately, after he'd gone, the college was broken into and the silver and the cash was stolen. Unfortunately, this bankrupted the college. So the following year, when the Great Fire comes along, the physicians lose their home and they're also bankrupt. So they're not in a very good position at this time. The collections of the Royal College of Physicians have some really wonderful items which give quite a unique story to the Great Fire of London. We have some wonderful examples of 17th century medical objects. In particular, this exhibition will highlight some of our recipe or receipt books. These are 17th century books which are handwritten. They would have been owned by people in the home, and they contain sort of recipes or receipts which are for home remedies for treating quite common ailments, diseases, injuries, sorts of things that you might sort of encounter every day. These would have been passed down through families, and they're often written in quite a few different hands. They would often appear alongside cookery recipes, so they would include sort of ingredients that you might commonly find in the home. Some of them have recipes for how to treat burns, so quite relevant for the Great Fire. They would often include ingredients like onions, eggs, lemons and butter. One of them has slightly unusual ingredients of the dung of a horse and grass. The exhibition also features some very nice Delftware apothecary jars. Now, these jars would contain the medicines that were made up by apothecaries, so they would be prescribed by physicians, made up by apothecaries, and then given over the counter to patients. And these also include remedies for all sorts of things like the plague, consumption, common coughs and colds. They also include remedies for burns, and one of them has the very nice ingredients of hog's lard, black poplar, hemlock and black henbane.
Medicine in the 17th century was very different to medicine as we know it today. The theories used by physicians were based in a large part on the theories that had been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years, medical practices that had originated with Greek physicians, people like Hippocrates and Galen. The primary medical theory was the theory of the four humours, which stated that the human body was made of four different main materials: blood, phlegm, yellow bile and black bile. This theory stated that disease was caused by an imbalance of these four humours and could be prevented or cured by bringing them into balance through medical treatments, medicines, diet, exercise and through other means.
We don't know a lot about what the physicians actually did during the Great Fire of London. According to the college annals, which are the official records of meetings of the college, the physicians last met in their home at Amon Corner on the 26th of July 1666. Then they met again on the 1st of October 1666, so after the fire, and they met at the home of Sir John Langham, who was a friend of their president. And this is where they met for the following 12 years until they had a new home. Now, what the actual physicians were doing while the fire was raging, we know that Peter Barrick, who lived in St Paul's Cathedral, we know that his home was completely destroyed and he had to move his practice to Westminster. The fire didn't reach Westminster, it reached as far as Temple. And the King's physician, William Denton, he and his wife were seen on the Thursday after the fire started, moving their possessions from their home at Salisbury Court out to Kensington. But we don't know how, for example, the physicians responded to the medical emergency of the fire. But was it a medical emergency? We're not entirely sure, because according to the official statistics, only 6 people lost their lives during the Great Fire of London. And there's no way this can be accurate, considering the amount of land that was destroyed. 373 acres were destroyed during the Great Fire of London. 13,000 homes were destroyed. 70 to 80,000 people were homeless. There must have been more deaths and more injuries as a result of it, but we will never know. The tragedy of the Great Fire of London affected everybody in the city: individuals, businesses, the King, institutions, organisations, including the Royal College of Physicians. We're having this exhibition to fetch out the fire because we wanted to tell the story of how the college was in a very sort of difficult situation at the time. The fire came along, they were bankrupt, and then they became homeless. But then through the sort of cooperation of the fellows and through generous benefactors, they were able to rebuild and sort of emerge in a wonderful new home. And this is sort of a metaphor for the City of London, how most of it was destroyed, but within a very, very short time, the city was sort of reborn.